A courtroom filled with people watching. A rich man smiling next to his girlfriend, and a pregnant woman standing by herself, scared but not running away. Nobody expects what happens next. Right in front of everyone, the husband walks forward and kicks the woman hard in her stomach, shocking the entire room. What they don't know is that the judge sitting at the front is not just any judge. He is the father she never met. And today is when everything changes. This story is about cruelty, power, and the kind of justice that hits harder than anyone expected. Tell us what time you were watching and where you were from. Leave a comment below. We would love to hear from you. The morning outside the Boston family court felt thick and heavy, as if the city knew something important was about to happen. News reporters filled the steps, fixing their cameras and microphones while waiting for the main people to arrive. Women's rights supporters stood behind barriers holding signs about justice for abuse victims. On the other side, fans of Marcus Walton, the real estate millionaire with a perfect public image, gathered with posters saying he was innocent. Between the two groups, the tension felt sharp and dangerous. Emma Collins stopped at the bottom of the courthouse steps. She was 29 years old and 7 months pregnant. Her belly was round under a simple light blue dress for expecting mothers. Her hands shook a little as she pulled the thin sweater around her shoulders. She never imagined her marriage would end in a courtroom. She never thought the father of her baby would bring her to a place like this. But scared or not, she had to be here. She took a slow breath, put a protective hand over her stomach, and started climbing the steps. Camera shutters clicked loudly. A reporter shouted her name, asking how she felt. Another asked if the rumors about her being unstable were true. Emma kept looking down and walked as steadily as she could. She reminded herself that her baby needed her to be strong. Her baby needed her alive. A black luxury car pulled up to the curb. The crowd moved quickly, shouting louder. Marcus Walton stepped out first. His suit looked perfectly fitted. His hair was styled and his face looked relaxed. He had the confidence of a man who always got what he wanted. Next to him, stepping out in a tight white dress, was Jessica Reed. Jessica was 31. Beautiful, glamorous, and smiling like she was at a party instead of a court hearing. The difference between how polished they looked and how nervous and vulnerable Emma looked made the crowd whisper. Some of Marcus's supporters cheered for him. Others gasped in shock at Jessica's presence. Inside the courthouse, the tension grew stronger. The courtroom was cold and quiet, with high ceilings that made even small sounds echo. Emma sat at her table with her lawyer. She tried to focus on breathing. Her heart pounded, and every movement in the courtroom felt extremely important. At the front of the room sat Judge Thomas Carter. His gray hair and calm posture showed years of experience. He looked around the room with controlled composure, but when his eyes landed on Emma, something flickered behind them. He had no logical reason for the feeling, yet he felt a strange familiarity when he looked at her. It was not recognition, it was something deeper and unspoken. Still, he forced himself to stay professional. The hearing started. Emma's lawyer stood and explained her request for protection, support, and main custody. The argument was careful and based on documented patterns of control and emotional abuse. Emma kept her hand over her belly, feeling her baby move under her skin, as if sensing the tension. Marcus's lawyer stood up with a rehearsed look of concern. He claimed Emma suffered from emotional problems. He said she misunderstood events. He even suggested she tended to exaggerate during pregnancy. The courtroom shifted uncomfortably at those words, but Marcus sat back proudly, confident in the story he had paid to build. Behind Marcus, Jessica sat with her arms crossed and her lips curved into a smirk. Every time Emma's name was mentioned, Jessica whispered something under her breath, rolling her eyes.
Her contempt felt so obvious that even Marcus's lawyer gave her subtle looks, silently urging her to act normal. When Emma's lawyer mentioned Marcus's affair and the financial pressure he used to force Emma to sign an unfair marriage agreement, Jessica exploded. She stood up suddenly and shouted, "She's lying! She's absolutely lying!" Her voice echoed across the room. Judge Carter slammed his gavel. "Miss Reed, sit down. You are not allowed to interrupt these proceedings." Marcus reached back calmly and put a hand on Jessica's arm. It was a gentle but controlling gesture, as if reminding her that he was still in charge. Jessica sank back into her seat, her jaw clenched, but her eyes burning with anger. The judge motioned for Emma to speak. Emma stood slowly, her hand still on her stomach. She spoke quietly but clearly. She described nights when Marcus cut off her access to money. She described weeks when he refused to let her see friends. She described the threats disguised as concerns about her mental health. As she spoke, the courtroom grew still. Even people who came in doubting found themselves listening. Cameras outside the courtroom pressed against the narrow windows. Emma felt exposed, but also strangely determined. She wanted the truth heard. She wanted her baby to know she tried. Jessica could not stand the attention shifting away from her. She whispered something to Marcus, but he kept staring straight ahead. Anger built in her face. She gripped the edge of her seat so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then it happened. Jessica jumped to her feet with explosive fury. "She's faking! She's acting! She's trying to ruin him!" Her voice became sharp and almost shrill. Before anyone could react, Jessica stepped forward. But this time, Marcus himself lunged toward Emma and delivered a violent kick straight into her stomach. A collective scream rose from the courtroom. Emma collapsed instantly, falling to the wooden floor. Her hands clutched her stomach as her body curled forward. A sharp cry escaped her lips, full of terror and pain. Fluid spilled onto the courtroom floor. The sound of it hitting the wood made several people gasp. The room erupted. Reporters yelled. Lawyers stumbled over chairs. Security lunged forward. Judge Carter froze for a split second. Then, something inside him snapped. His face drained of color. His voice, usually calm and steady, burst out in a shout that shook the room. "Security! Call an ambulance! Now!" His eyes were fixed on Emma, who lay trembling on the floor, struggling to breathe, her fingers shaking as they tried desperately to protect the life inside her. And for reasons he could not yet understand, the sight hit him with pain he had never felt before. The world around Emma dissolved into a blur of lights, footsteps, and shouting voices as the paramedics rushed her out of the courtroom. She could still feel the echo of the kick in her stomach, a deep, exploding pain that pulsed through her entire body. Every bump of the stretcher made her catch her breath. She tried to keep her hands pressed against her stomach, as if her palms could protect the small life inside her from more harm. Her tears soaked into the side of her face and into the blanket covering her. The courthouse doors burst open, and the stretcher rolled into the waiting ambulance. Emma could hear the faint alarm of the ambulance equipment as the paramedics moved quickly.
One paramedic leaned over her. His voice was steady but urgent. He told her to stay awake. He told her to breathe. He told her they were doing everything they could. Emma tried to nod, but her throat felt tight, and breathing became harder with every second. The siren wailed as the ambulance sped through traffic. The red lights flashing against the windows made the inside look even more chaotic. A paramedic pressed a monitor to her stomach, searching for the baby's heartbeat. The loud rhythmic beeping filled the back of the truck. Emma stared at the ceiling, fighting the rising terror inside her. She whispered to her baby, telling it to hold on. She did not even know if the child could hear her, but speaking felt like the only control she had left. When they arrived at the hospital, the paramedics pushed the stretcher down a long hallway. The bright lights overhead made Emma squint. Nurses moved quickly around her, calling out instructions, clearing pathways, preparing equipment.
A doctor rushed to her side. His voice came through sharply and urgently. He said she was 28 weeks. He said they needed to stabilize both mother and baby. Emma heard the words, but could not fully process them. Every sound overlapped with the echo of the kick and the fear gripping her chest. They brought her into a monitoring room. Cold gel touched her stomach. Sensors were attached. A machine hummed to life and began making the rhythmic beeping of the baby's heart monitor. The sound became Emma's entire world. Each beep felt like a thread connecting her to hope. Each slight pause made her heart skip. She struggled to breathe through the panic, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The doctor told her to stay still while they checked for signs of internal bleeding and problems with her womb. Nurses moved around her, adjusting the bed, attaching IV lines, checking her pulse. The air smelled strongly of hospital cleaner. Emma stared at the ceiling tiles, trying to blink away the tears that kept filling her eyes. She wanted to be brave. She wanted to stay calm, but the terror of losing the baby was overwhelming. She felt as if her entire life rested on the steady beeping of the machine beside her. A nurse turned on the television mounted in the waiting area outside her room. Although the door was partially closed, Emma could still hear the voices from the broadcast. A breaking news alert played repeatedly. The headline said that a pregnant woman had been kicked inside a courtroom by a millionaire husband. Then the video began. Emma recognized the moment instantly. The screen captured Marcus lunging forward and the violent swing of his leg as it connected with Emma's stomach. Reporters argued over details. Commentators debated what had happened. The sound of her own cry echoed faintly from the television, and it made Emma's body tense with shame and fear. She turned her face away and closed her eyes. Tears slid down her cheeks. Her baby moved weakly inside her, and she clutched the side of the bed, praying silently that the movement was a good sign. She felt painfully alone. She wished someone was there to sit with her, to hold her hand, to reassure her that she would not lose her child. But the room felt too big and too empty. The only steady sound was the baby's monitor. Her phone vibrated on the side table. The nurse handed it to her gently, thinking it might be family. Emma answered with shaking hands. Marcus's voice filled the room. It was cold, sharp, and disturbingly calm. He told her not to speak to the press. He told her not to accuse him of abuse. He told her that if she dared to use the incident in court, he would take the baby from her. He reminded her that he had money and lawyers. He reminded her that she would lose if she fought him. Emma closed her eyes, gripping the phone. She could barely speak. She felt the words cut deeper than the pain in her stomach. When she hung up, her hand trembled so badly the phone almost slipped from her grasp. A few minutes later, another message appeared. This one from Jessica. It contained only 5 words. Next time, he won't miss. Emma stared at the text until her vision blurred. Her stomach tightened again with pain. She tried to breathe, but her chest felt tight. The room suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too suffocating. A soft hand touched hers. Emma opened her eyes and saw an older nurse standing beside the bed. The woman introduced herself as Margaret Foster. Her voice was gentle but firm. She told Emma she had seen husbands like Marcus Walton before. She told her not to sign anything. She told her that men who used power to control their wives always got worse when threatened. Emma listened to Margaret's voice and felt a small thread of comfort pull her back from panic. It was the first compassion she had felt since collapsing on the courtroom floor. Night settled outside the hospital windows. The lights in the room dimmed, but Emma could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's foot coming toward her. Every time the baby's...
Without saying a word, Margaret pulled out her phone and quietly photographed the documents. Then she looked at Emma with a steady, reassuring expression. She told her not to sign anything. She told her that there were people who could help. She told her that Marcus's power was not absolute, no matter how strong he seemed. Emma felt a small surge of relief, fragile yet real. Outside the hospital walls, the public remained sharply divided. Emma's name appeared everywhere on social media.
Some people defended her, saying that no woman, especially a pregnant woman, would fake being kicked in a courtroom. Others mocked her, calling her a liar, a drama seeker, or a gold digger. Comment sections became battlegrounds filled with insults. The cruelty of strangers made Emma feel even more exposed. Inside the courthouse, however, a different kind of battle was beginning. Judge Thomas Carter sat in his private office with the blinds partially closed. He stared at the stack of files on his desk. Something about Emma had stayed with him long after the courtroom emptied. He could not shake the feeling that her pain meant more to him than that of any stranger. It unsettled him. It also pushed him to act. He directed his clerk to get the full security footage from the courtroom, not the edited clips shown in the media, but the raw, uncut footage recorded from the overhead camera and the camera behind the witness stand. When the files were delivered, Thomas closed his office door and played the footage alone. The grainy video showed everything clearly. Emma standing nervously, Jessica glaring at her, the moment Marcus lunged forward with fury on his face, the violent kick, Emma collapsing. The camera also captured Emma's expression, not of performance or exaggeration, but of genuine horror. Thomas paused the video on her face. A strange ache spread through his chest. He leaned closer to the screen and studied her features, her eyes, her expression. Something familiar lived in those details. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old envelope that had remained sealed for years. Inside it were photographs of a woman named Rachel Collins. She had been Thomas's first love. They met when he was young and hopeful. They planned a life together. Then one day, without explanation, she disappeared. No note, no call, nothing. He searched for her for years, but every lead ended in silence. And now, as he studied Emma's face on the monitor, memories of Rachel flooded back with unsettling clarity. He opened his laptop and searched public records. He found Emma's birthplace. He found basic details about her mother. He found the dates and locations. One by one, the pieces fit together. Her age matched exactly with the year he lost contact with Rachel. Her mother's name matched the woman he once loved. The more he connected the dots, the more his breath caught in his throat. For the first time since he became a judge, Thomas felt his hands shake. Everything pointed toward one devastating and unbelievable conclusion. Emma Collins, the woman lying in a hospital bed after being kicked by a millionaire husband, might be the daughter he lost decades ago. He closed the file slowly and stared at the wall. His heart beat unevenly. His thoughts spiraled. Hope mixed with fear, and the weight of the discovery settled over him like a storm waiting to break. The late afternoon sunlight drifted through the blinds of the hospital room, casting long strips of pale gold across the walls. Emma lay propped against her pillows, staring at the ceiling without really seeing it. She felt drained, both physically and emotionally. The steady beeping of the baby's monitor beside her had become the soundtrack of her days and nights. Each sound reassured her that her baby was still hanging on, still fighting, but the fear of what might happen next clung to her like a shadow she could not escape. Her eyelids felt heavy. She wanted to rest, but her mind refused to quiet. The video being spread online, the lies, the threats from Marcus, the legal documents waiting on the bedside table, and the strange email claiming someone might be her father. She did not know what to believe anymore. The uncertainty twisted inside her chest. A soft click interrupted the silence. The door opened slowly. Emma turned her head, expecting a nurse, or perhaps Margaret coming to check on her. Instead, she saw a man step into the room. He was tall, with gray hair combed neatly back, wearing a pressed shirt and a dark jacket. His face was calm, yet lined with something heavier than age alone. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said quietly, almost carefully. "My name is Thomas Carter." Emma blinked. For a moment she didn't place the name, then recognition struck her. The judge, the man who had sat at the front of the courtroom when her entire world had collapsed. Her stomach tightened. She shifted slightly upright, her hand moving to her belly. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was soft but weary. "Is something wrong with my case?" He shook his head slowly. "I'm not here in any official way." He stepped closer, but not too close, as if afraid to overwhelm her. "I know you may not want to see me, I understand that, but I believed it was important to speak with you." Emma felt tension rush to her shoulders. She assumed he was here to tell her to reconsider the legal battle, or perhaps to warn her about speaking to the media. Judges were not supposed to get involved like this. Something about his presence felt strange. She swallowed hard. "If this is about the hearing," she said carefully, "I know the situation was chaotic. I know you must be under pressure, but I did not lie about anything." "I know you didn't," he replied immediately, surprising her. The honesty in his voice made her pause. "This is not about the hearing. This is about something else entirely." She frowned, confused. Thomas reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. Emma tensed again, unsure of what he would pull out. When he brought out a small, slightly worn photograph, he held it gently, as if it was something precious. "I have reason to believe," he said quietly, "that I might be your father." Emma stared at him, stunned. For a moment her mind went blank. She looked at the photograph in his hand. He extended it slowly towards her. With trembling fingers she took it. The picture showed a young woman with soft eyes and long hair standing beside a much younger version of the man now in her hospital room. The woman looked familiar, not because Emma had ever seen her in person, but because her mother had kept only one photo of her youth in an old drawer. It was the same woman. It was Rachel Collins. Her breath caught. Her pulse quickened. She felt as though the ground beneath her was tilting. "That's my mother," she whispered. Thomas nodded. His eyes held a mix of sadness and hope. "I met her many years ago. We were very young. My family disapproved. She left without telling me she was pregnant. I searched for her for years, but never found where she went." Emma looked down at the photograph again. Her mother had never spoken about Emma's father. Every question Emma had asked through her childhood had been avoided or brushed aside with vague answers. Emma had always assumed he had abandoned them, or that he simply didn't care. To hear this now was like having a curtain pulled back on a part of her life she never expected to see clearly. "Why now?" she asked. Her voice wavered between shock and anger. Thomas' chest rose and fell with a steadying breath. "I deserve that question, and I cannot change what happened. I can only tell you that I tried. I didn't know where she went. She disappeared from every place I searched. If you choose to take a DNA test, and if it confirms what I believe, then I want to stand by you now. I want to help protect you and your baby." He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "I will step down from your case to avoid any problem of interest, but privately I can help. I can hire a lawyer who specializes in cases like this, someone who will not be scared by Marcus Walton." Emma looked at him for a long moment. Her emotions swirled chaotically, but beneath the confusion was a small spark of something she had not felt in a long time. Fragile, yet real.
Thomas placed a small envelope on the table beside her. Inside was information for a DNA test. "Take your time," he said softly. "Whatever you choose, I will respect it." He turned to leave. Emma stared at the envelope, her hand resting protectively on her belly. For the first time since the attack, she did not feel entirely alone. The following morning, the hospital room felt unusually quiet. Emma sat upright in her bed, exhausted but alert, waiting for the visitor Judge Carter had told her about. She did not know what to expect. Her life had changed drastically within days. Every hour brought new information, new fear, or new uncertainty. She could only hope that whoever was coming would help her rather than place another burden on her already trembling shoulders. A firm knock sounded at the door. When it opened, a woman stepped inside with confident strides. She wore a dark gray suit and carried a leather briefcase under her arm. Her presence filled the room immediately. Her hair, streaked with gray, was tied back in a clean twist, and her expression carried both authority and strength. "You must be Emma Collins," the woman said, offering her hand. "I'm Patricia Morgan." Emma shook her hand. Patricia's grip was steady, reassuring, and strong in a way that made Emma exhale the breath she had not realized she was holding. "Judge Carter asked me to come.
Patricia continued as she pulled a chair beside the bed. He said you need someone who will not hesitate to stand up to a man like Marcus Walton. Emma nodded slowly. He told me you were experienced. Patricia opened her briefcase and took out several folders. That's one way to put it. I've handled cases involving powerful men who believe they can buy silence. When the judge mentioned Marcus's name, I recognized it immediately. Emma's eyebrows lifted. You did? Yes. Patricia folded her hands. 5 years ago, his first wife died. The case was ruled a suicide. She was pregnant, 26 weeks. The official record said she jumped from the balcony of their apartment building. Emma's heart dropped. I didn't know. I suspected from the start that something was wrong. The timing, the circumstances, the inconsistencies in the medical report. But the case was closed quickly, too quickly. A cold shiver crawled through Emma's spine. She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling her baby shift beneath her palm. She swallowed hard. Patricia then opened the first folder. Inside were printed news articles, old police notes, and several grainy photographs. Judge Carter used his connections to get the archives from the original investigation, and I requested a deeper look from contacts within the Bureau. The Bureau? Emma whispered. FBI, Patricia nodded. Some parts of the file were difficult to get, but we have what matters. She lifted one photograph. It showed a balcony with crime scene tape and a woman's purse lying on the ground. Another photo showed a pair of shoes positioned strangely far from the railing. Patricia tapped the edge of the image. The detective assigned to the case suspected foul play. His notes showed inconsistencies, including bruising patterns that didn't match a fall, but before he could continue his investigation, he was removed from the case. The report was finished under a different supervisor. The timing matched with a very large anonymous donation to the police department. Emma stared at the photograph, horrified. You think Marcus paid them off? I think Marcus has a long history of paying off whoever he needs to. Patricia opened another folder, and this is darker. She slid a printed spreadsheet toward Emma. These are records of offshore accounts linked to shell companies. The transactions spiked dramatically the month before his wife's death, and again immediately after. Millions transferred to unregistered businesses. Emma covered her mouth with her hand. She felt sick. He planned it. We can't say that yet, Patricia replied carefully, but the pattern is troubling. As she continued explaining, Emma noticed another set of photographs. These were camera images from 5 years ago. Patricia put them on the table one by one. In each one, Marcus and Jessica Reed appeared together, not as strangers or new acquaintances, but as two people who clearly had a shared history. In this frame, Patricia said, pointing to one image, Jessica is seen arguing with Marcus's first wife 3 days before her death. This footage was buried in the original files. If Jessica has been in Marcus's life for that long, then their relationship didn't begin recently. And if she confronted the previous wife, she might have been involved in far more than we know. The air seemed to thicken around Emma. She felt as if every breath weighed heavier. 30 minutes ago, she believed she was fighting Marcus alone. Now she understood she might be dealing with a man who had destroyed another woman before her, a woman also carrying his child. Patricia's voice softened. I know this is difficult to hear, but you need to understand the danger. Patterns like this rarely stop on their own. Nurse Margaret knocked lightly and entered with a chart. She paused when she saw the table covered with photographs. I remember her, Margaret said quietly, his first wife. She came to the hospital once. I noticed bruises on her arms, faded ones, and when I mentioned documenting them, the attending doctor told me to leave it alone. He said her husband was handling her care privately. Why would he say that? Emma asked. Margaret sighed. We now know the attending doctor accepted donations from Marcus for years. He bought equipment, renovations, and a few vacations. In return, he dismissed anything that could make Marcus look bad. Patricia nodded. It matches everything we found. Margaret continued. She seemed afraid that day. I tried to talk to her, but she avoided eye contact. I never saw her again after that. When I heard about her death, I knew something was wrong, but no one asked the nurses for statements. Patricia looked at Emma. This is why we need to build a team, a quiet one, a careful one. She listed them in calm, precise order. Thomas has legal influence. I will handle strategic lawsuits. Margaret will serve as a medical witness, and Detective Daniel Wright, who worked on the earlier case before being removed, has agreed to help gather old evidence. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying, but it was also the first time Emma felt the ground beneath her feet return. If Marcus did something with his first wife, then the attack on me wasn't sudden. It could be the beginning of the same pattern. Patricia nodded seriously. That's why we must act before he does. Emma stared at the board Patricia assembled on a portable rolling table. At the center was a photo of Marcus, surrounded by the faces of women, files of financial transactions, maps of his properties, and timelines of deaths and disappearances. Red strings connected events across years. It looked exactly like something from a criminal investigation. It was also the first time Emma truly understood the scope of the danger she was in and the scope of what they had to do next. The storm that followed the emerging investigation did not scare Marcus Walton. In fact, it energized him. He had faced public attention before and had always come out stronger. This time, he intended to crush the story before it took hold. Within 24 hours of learning that Emma had hired legal help, he contacted one of the most expensive public relations firms in the country. Their office occupied the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the city like a throne. They were known for reshaping scandals into sympathy. Marcus arrived with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. He brought a team of lawyers, a portfolio of carefully edited documents, and instructions for the strategy he wanted used. He insisted the public was being manipulated. He insisted Emma was trying to extort him. He demanded that the PR firm create a story highlighting his achievements, his charitable works, and his rise from a modest background. He framed himself as a victim of a cruel plot. Within hours, the firm released a polished video titled "The Truth Behind the Courtroom Chaos." The clip showed Marcus as calm and reasonable. It presented him as a supportive husband who tried to help a struggling wife. It hinted that Emma's emotional problems caused the incident in the courtroom. It suggested that Jessica only reacted out of fear.
Commenters on certain networks echoed these claims, repeating the story word for word. The PR machine moved with precision, shaping public opinion in real time. The next phase of the plan included putting Jessica in front of cameras. She appeared on a popular talk show dressed in soft colors, her face arranged into an expression of fragile regret. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as she described her version of the story. She said she had been afraid. She said Emma lunged first. She said she reacted on instinct. She even claimed she prayed for the baby's safety every night. Her performance was emotional enough to convince some viewers. People who had not seen the unedited footage began to question what truly happened in the courtroom. The power of polished lies became painfully clear. Public polling slightly shifted in Marcus's favor. Supporters of his real estate empire defended him loudly. They called him a symbol of success. They said men like him were always targeted by jealous spouses. They accused Emma of chasing money. For a short time, Marcus felt victorious. He enjoyed watching the tide turn. But not everyone believed him. Not everyone was willing to accept Jessica's performance. And one of the first to publicly push against the story was Thomas Carter. Thomas appeared on a respected news channel known for investigative journalism and honesty. He was introduced as a retired federal judge, not as someone involved in the recent case.
His voice remained steady as he spoke about a disturbing pattern he had observed over years on the bench. He discussed the recurring dynamics of abuse involving pregnant women. He mentioned how power, control, and money often silenced victims. He did not mention Emma's name. He did not mention Marcus, but the message was clear. Viewers who respected Thomas's long career listened closely. His credibility carried weight. His calm analysis stood in contrast to Marcus's emotional outbursts and Jessica's staged tears. The interview was replayed throughout the day and then shared by thousands online. Meanwhile, Patricia Morgan continued her own offensive. She provided a respected investigative journalist with documents that revealed suspicious financial activities, offshore accounts, hidden transactions, shell companies, payments timed perfectly to match events that helped Marcus escape responsibility in the past. The journalist spent days verifying the information before publishing a groundbreaking report titled From Real Estate King to Master Manipulator. The article spread rapidly across social media. It raised questions. It disturbed people who once saw Marcus as a symbol of success. It hinted at a pattern not just of manipulation, but of criminal behavior. None of the accusations were final, but the connections were too sharp to ignore. Marcus tried to control the damage. He appeared on live television, shouting over the host. He accused journalists of lying. He claimed political enemies were targeting him. He threatened lawsuits against anyone who spoke against him. But each angry outburst chipped away at the image he had tried to build. Viewers who once admired him began to notice how quickly he lost control. They noticed how often he avoided direct questions. They noticed how hostility lived beneath his polished surface. At the hospital, Patricia arranged a brief, carefully controlled interview for Emma. It lasted less than 5 minutes. A single camera captured Emma sitting on the hospital bed with soft lights around her. She wore no makeup. She made no dramatic gestures. She spoke in a soft, steady voice. When asked what she wanted, she answered simply, "I just want my baby safe." That one sentence aired across the country. Elderly viewers sitting in living rooms across America felt something shift inside them. Women who had raised children decades earlier saw the quiet fear in Emma's eyes and recognized it. Grandmothers remembered the dangers of pregnancy in their own youth. Mothers recognized the tremble in Emma's voice. Older Americans who valued honesty over show began forming their own opinions. They were not moved by Jessica's tears or Marcus's rants. They were moved by the simplicity of a frightened mother trying to protect her child. Gradually, public opinion began shifting again. It did not happen with dramatic speed. It happened quietly in living rooms, retirement communities, church groups, and neighborhood gatherings. Older women especially felt protective towards Emma. They shared her interview. They commented with prayers. They called into radio shows to defend her. They saw her not as a figure in a scandal, but as a human being. Hashtags began appearing on social media. At first, they were small. Then they grew. Within days, hashtag #ProtectEmma started appearing under thousands of posts. It was followed by Believe Pregnant Women, a powerful force against Marcus's campaign. The hashtag spread across platforms with messages of support. People demanded justice. People demanded safety for Emma and her unborn child. People demanded responsibility. Marcus's PR team tried to fight back, but momentum had shifted. Their polished videos no longer drew admiration. Their claims of innocence no longer felt convincing. Marcus had lost control of the story, and for the first time in his career, he was not the one steering public perception. Emma, watching quietly from her hospital bed, felt the shift as well. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel safe, but she felt something new. She felt the world starting to see her truth.
The tension in the hospital room felt different now. It was no longer the suffocating fear of isolation. It was the quiet stillness before movement, the sense that something larger had begun shifting in Emma's favor. Her world was still fragile. Her baby was still at risk, but she no longer felt alone. Real help was forming around her, and it carried weight far beyond anything Marcus could buy. Judge Thomas Carter arrived early in the morning, his expressions serious but determined. He sat beside Emma's bed and held a folder in his hands. He had already made the decision that would change everything. "I've officially stepped down from your case," he said gently. "It's necessary. I can't risk any conflict of interest, but that doesn't mean I'm stepping away from you." Emma looked at him, feeling a strange mixture of relief and fear. "So what happens now?" Thomas's voice softened. "Now I stand behind you as your father, and I will help you fight this battle from the outside." The words hit her with unexpected force. Hearing him say father still felt unreal, but it warmed something deep in her chest. She nodded slowly. Patricia Morgan joined them shortly after. She stood by the foot of the bed, flipping through a thick binder. "Since the judge has stepped back, we need reinforcements. People who know how to fight men like Marcus. I've already reached out to someone. He's on his way." An hour later, a tall man in his 40s entered the room. He wore a dark coat and carried the seriousness of someone who had spent years navigating the darkest corners of financial crime. "I'm Robert Chen," he said, offering a respectful nod. "Former federal prosecutor. I spent 15 years investigating financial abuse among the wealthy. Judge Carter and Patricia told me enough to know this situation is bigger than domestic violence." He placed several documents on the small table beside Emma's bed. "These money transfers, these offshore accounts, these sudden deaths, this is a system, a built structure of manipulation and financial cover-up." His words chilled Emma. It was terrifying to hear her worst assumptions confirmed by a federal expert. Detective Daniel Wright arrived next. The moment he entered, he carried a thick box filled with old files. He had been the detective who originally investigated the death of Marcus's first wife before being suddenly removed. "I have contacts who never forgot that case," he told the group. "I spoke to them last night. They're afraid, but they're willing to help now that Walton is finally under examination." He opened the box and began laying things across the table. "This is the building security guard who saw the bruises. This is the neighbor who heard the shouting. This is the roommate who lived with Marcus's first wife in college. She remembers the personality changes, the fear, the attempts to leave him." He picked up another statement. "And this, a delivery driver. 5 years ago, he saw Marcus wrap his hand around her throat in their doorway. He reported it. The report disappeared." Emma inhaled sharply. She felt her pulse quicken with each revelation. She knew Marcus was dangerous. She knew he hurt people, but seeing a network of erased voices laid out on the table made her weak. Margaret entered the room soon after, holding a folder of her own. "These records were released after the attending doctor was removed from his position," she said quietly. "You should see what he covered up." There were multiple reports of injuries on Marcus's first wife. The system flagged them, but the attending doctor dismissed them each time. "Now that he's been fired, we have access." She handed the folder to Patricia, who opened it carefully. "This is valuable," Patricia said. "These records build the medical foundation for a larger case." Then came the biggest shock of the morning. A man Emma had never seen before stepped through the door. He looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "This is Kevin Ross," Detective Wright explained. "Marcus's former personal driver." Kevin rubbed his hands together. "I should have come forward years ago, but I was scared. I thought he would destroy my life." Patricia spoke gently. "What do you know, Mr. Ross?" Kevin looked down at the floor, gathering himself. 5 years ago, the night his first wife died, I drove Marcus and Jessica to a cabin outside the city. They stayed there until morning. They told me not to speak of it. Marcus paid me to forget. I tried, but when I saw the news about Emma, I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Silence filled the room. Then Patricia nodded firmly. "Your testimony will matter." Robert Chen began putting together the strategy.
He laid the pieces on the table and spoke with the calm precision of someone used to building strong cases. First, we petition for search warrants. We need access to Marcus's digital records, emails, messages, financial transfers. Second, we freeze his offshore accounts. Third, we prepare to bring Jessica in for questioning.
"But will the court approve it?" Emma asked. "With the right evidence, yes," Robert said, "and we're gathering more of it by the hour." Through all of this, Thomas stood quietly near the window, watching Emma's face. When Patricia finally placed a DNA test kit on the tray beside her bed, he stepped closer. "You don't have to take it," he said softly, "but if you want certainty, I'm ready." Emma lifted the kit slowly. Her hands trembled. Thomas stood perfectly still, his emotions barely contained behind careful patience. After a moment of quiet thought, she opened the kit. She followed the instructions. When she handed the sample to Patricia for transport to the lab, she felt her breath catching. Hours passed. Evening settled outside the window. Nurses moved quietly through the halls. The baby's monitor continued its steady rhythm. Then the door opened again. Patricia entered slowly, holding a sealed envelope. Emma's heart raced. Thomas's face went pale. Patricia placed the envelope on the table without speaking. Emma opened it with shaking fingers. Positive, a clear and undeniable confirmation. Thomas Carter was her biological father. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, Emma allowed herself to cry freely. And when Thomas stepped forward, tears in his own eyes, she placed her hand in his. He held it with trembling respect, not as a judge, not as a stranger, but as a father meeting his daughter for the first time. The others in the room stepped back respectfully as the two shared a moment of quiet connection. It was brief, fragile, and extraordinary. When the moment passed, Robert closed the files in front of him. "We have everything we need," he said. "Tonight we prepare for the confrontation." At the center of the room, the justice team stood united. The night ahead would begin the battle that would expose everything Marcus had tried so hard to bury. The ballroom of the Grand Boston Hotel shimmered beneath hundreds of crystal lights as the annual charity event began. Marcus Walton had chosen this night carefully. He wanted the world to see him as a symbol of compassion. He stepped onto the red carpet wearing a tailored black suit that gleamed under the cameras. Reporters shouted his name. Flash after flash painted his smile in bright white bursts that made him appear almost heroic. He raised his hand with a practiced gesture, looking every bit the generous innovator the event promised to celebrate. Beside him walked Jessica Reed, dressed in a flowing white gown that sparkled with sequins from shoulder to hem. She held Marcus's arm tightly, tilting her head toward him with a soft expression that had been rehearsed for days. She wanted to appear gentle and misunderstood, a woman caught in an unfortunate situation. Cameras captured her every angle. She let a few tears fall at the right moment, claiming she wished only for healing. Many people in the audience watched her with mixed reactions, unsure what to believe. Inside the ballroom, the decorations glittered with gold and ivory. A giant digital banner displayed the theme of the evening, empowering women in times of crisis. Marcus had insisted on it. He believed nothing would clean his reputation faster than announcing a charitable fund. He wanted applause. He wanted admiration. He wanted forgiveness before anyone realized what he had done. Guests filled the tables in elegant clothing. They whispered about headlines, but tried to remain polite, unsure where the truth lay. Patricia Morgan, Robert Chen, Detective Wright, and Thomas Carter entered through the VIP entrance. Their invitations had been arranged strategically so they could move within the crowd without raising suspicion. Patricia wore a navy gown with a modest cut, Robert and Wright dressed in dark suits. Thomas kept a calm expression, though tension simmered beneath his quiet composure. They did not speak much as they walked. They had prepared for this moment with careful planning.
Outside the building, a separate black vehicle arrived at a quiet side entrance. Emma sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a warm coat that covered the medical bandaging around her stomach. A nurse gently pushed her forward, while two security staff walked beside her. Emma looked pale but determined. Her face was no longer clouded by helplessness. Instead, her eyes held a clear purpose. She knew tonight would determine her future and her baby's safety. A small group of staff escorted her through a quiet hallway. She breathed slowly to manage the discomfort in her ribs and stomach. Every movement reminded her of the violent attack that had pushed her here. Yet she refused to turn back. She had asked to be present. She wanted to see the truth revealed with her own eyes. She wanted to witness the moment when Marcus's lies would crumble. Unknown to most guests, an investigative journalist had placed hidden microphones beneath the stage earlier in the evening. The journalist had worked closely with Patricia and Robert to ensure no technical problem could interrupt the reveal. The devices were hidden behind flower arrangements and small decorative panels. They would capture every sound on stage once the time came.
Emma's heartbeat quickened when she learned of the setup. She felt as if the entire room was a sealed chamber waiting to explode. Marcus stepped onto the stage as the orchestra softened its music. He approached the microphone with an expression of deep sorrow. He placed his hand over his chest and bowed his head. His voice trembled as he began his speech. He spoke about compassion. He spoke about redemption. He claimed he wanted to support pregnant women in crisis. He even let a tear fall while describing how misunderstood he felt. Some guests clapped politely. Others watched uneasily, sensing something off. Jessica stood nearby, clasping her hands together as if in prayer. She blinked dramatically whenever cameras focused on her. She wanted sympathy. She wanted validation. She wanted people to believe she had been the victim. Her white gown shimmered beneath the stage lights, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her calm appearance. She kept glancing toward the audience, unsure why some faces looked too focused. Near the back of the ballroom, Robert Chen caught Patricia's eye. He gave a slow, deliberate signal. Patricia pressed the small device in her hand. The giant screens mounted around the ballroom flickered once. The guests turned their heads, expecting another fundraising graphic. Instead, the screen went blank for several seconds. Then the image appeared. The uncut courtroom footage. Gasps rose instantly. The video showed Emma standing in the courtroom with her hands on her stomach. Marcus appeared in the corner of the frame. Then the kick came, sharply and brutally. The original sound filled the ballroom. Emma's cry echoed through the speakers. The thud of impact vibrated beneath the audience's feet. Marcus froze. Jessica's face drained of color. The audience watched in horrified silence. No edits, no distortions, no excuses. It was clear evidence of violence. A wave of outrage rippled through the room as people placed their hands over their mouths. Some began shouting. Others stepped back from Marcus and Jessica as if they were toxic. Emma watched from her wheelchair, her breath shaking. Another clip began playing. This time it showed financial records, offshore transactions, and interviews with witnesses. The voice of Kevin Ross described the night he had driven Marcus and Jessica to a cabin while Marcus's wife was dying. The ballroom erupted with noise. Guests shouted in disbelief. People stood from their seats. Phones recorded everything. The truth spread faster than Marcus could react. Marcus lunged toward the stage controls, screaming for someone to shut off the screen. Jessica stumbled backward, shaking violently. Before either could flee, federal agents rushed through the side doors. The agents announced themselves with clear, commanding voices.
They moved with practiced precision. Marcus was seized in full view of the cameras. Jessica tried to slip through the crowd, but two agents intercepted her quickly. The applause that followed was not joyous, it was furious. It was the sound of long overdue justice. Emma felt tears rise, not from pain, but from relief. Thomas moved to her side, placing his hand over hers. The flashes of cameras illuminated their faces as they watched Marcus and Jessica taken away. The truth had finally been revealed. The night of revelation had begun the end. The federal courthouse in Boston buzzed with an intensity that could be felt even from the street. Reporters crowded the entrance, setting up tripods and microphones as helicopters circled overhead. People lined the sidewalks hoping to witness history. Inside, security officers prepared for a trial that would shake the entire country. The fall of Marcus Walton, once celebrated as a visionary millionaire, had captured the nation's attention. He arrived in handcuffs, surrounded by federal marshals. His face showed the marks of a struggle. A bruise swelled beneath his left eye, and a cut along his cheek had been hastily bandaged. He had resisted arrest the night of the event, and his injuries reflected both his desperation and his refusal to accept defeat. He walked with a stiff posture, trying to hold on to whatever dignity he had left, but the cameras were relentless, capturing his downfall with merciless clarity. Jessica Reed appeared shortly after. The dazzling woman who once posed confidently on red carpets now looked almost unrecognizable. Her hair hung limp at her shoulders. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She held her arms tightly against her body, as if trying to shrink into herself.
She glanced nervously at Marcus, but he refused to look at her. 2 days earlier, she had attempted to negotiate a reduced charge by blaming him entirely. She was now trapped between fear and survival, desperately trying to save what little hope she had. Inside the courtroom, former federal prosecutor Robert Chen stood at the front, organizing documents with steady hands. He wore a dark suit that carried the authority of years spent pursuing justice. When the judge entered and announced the beginning of the proceedings, Robert stepped forward. He spoke with clarity and force, laying out the case. He began with the unedited video from the courtroom. The footage appeared on the large screen. Gasps echoed through the room as Marcus's violent kick played in slow motion. The raw sound of Emma's cry filled the courtroom. No one could deny what they saw. No one could explain it away. Next came the financial evidence. Robert presented charts, spreadsheets, and banking reports that revealed a complex network of offshore accounts. He explained how millions of dollars had moved in suspicious patterns over several years. The transfers were linked to key moments surrounding the death of the first wife. The dots connected with chilling precision. He then introduced the hospital records. Nurse Margaret had uncovered them after the corrupt doctor was removed. Robert presented photographs of the bruising on the first wife, along with testimony showing how reports were suppressed. The room fell into a heavy silence. It was no longer just a story about one attack. It was a story of a pattern, a history, a system designed by Marcus Walton to maintain control and eliminate anyone who threatened him. One by one, the witnesses took the stand. Kevin Ross, the former driver, testified first. His voice trembled slightly as he described the night he drove Marcus and Jessica to a secluded cabin while the first wife was left alone at the apartment. He admitted he had been paid to stay quiet. His fear was clear, but his conviction was stronger now. Then came the building security guard. He spoke about the bruises he had seen but had been told to ignore. The friend and former roommate of the first wife testified next. She recounted the emotional breakdowns, the fear, and the threats the woman had confided. The delivery driver who had witnessed Marcus choking his wife followed. His testimony brought several jurors to the edge of tears. Finally, Nurse Margaret walked steadily to the stand. Her calm voice carried the weight of truth. She described the day she had examined the first wife. She explained how she had wanted to document the injuries, but the attending doctor blocked her. She admitted she had kept that memory for years, unable to forget the desperation in the patient's eyes. Cameras captured the serious expression of the jurors as they listened. It became clear that every piece fit together. Hours into the proceedings, the bailiff opened the side door. Emma entered the courtroom in her wheelchair, pushed gently by a nurse. She wore a loose blouse to avoid pressing against the bandages around her stomach. Her face looked pale but firm. She held her stomach instinctively as the wheels rolled forward. The room fell silent. She positioned herself near the witness table. When she began to speak, her voice shook but never broke. "He tried to erase me, just like the others." The courtroom felt frozen in time. Even the judge paused before taking the next note. Emma continued, explaining how Marcus isolated her, threatened her, and manipulated her. She spoke about the kick, the terror of losing her child, and the long nights listening to the baby's monitor for comfort. Not a single person in the room looked away. Marcus's lawyer rose to cross-examine her. His tone lacked conviction. His questions came out hesitant and weak. Each argument he attempted crumbled against the undeniable weight of evidence. The judge rejected most of his objections. Even Marcus could not hide his frustration. He slammed his cuffed hands against the table, earning a warning from the judge. Then came the breaking point. Jessica collapsed into tears at the defense table. She begged to speak. The judge allowed it only after repeated requests. She stood shakily and admitted that Marcus had often belittled her and controlled her. She said he viewed pregnant women as burdens. She repeated the chilling words he once said. "She's pregnant. She's just a weight. I'll handle it." Her confession hit the courtroom like a blow. Gasps erupted. Marcus's face twisted with rage. He shouted that she was lying, but the guards forced him back into his seat. The judge called for order. When silence finally returned, he delivered the verdict. Marcus Walton was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. Jessica Reed received 18 years for her role as an accomplice. The room erupted in emotional release. Emma covered her face with her hands and sobbed. The weight of months of fear and pain poured out of her. Thomas Carter moved quickly to her side. He knelt beside her wheelchair, holding her hand in both of his. His forehead trembled as he tried to speak, but emotion overcame him. "You're safe now," he whispered. Emma lowered her hand slowly, tears still streaming down her cheeks. She felt a faint movement inside her belly, a tiny kick, a quiet reassurance. Her baby was still there, still fighting, still alive. And for the first time, she felt they had truly won.
The days following the verdict felt like stepping into a different world. The fear that had once clung to Emma's every breath slowly loosened. Her doctors told her that her vital signs had stabilized. The bruising around her ribs had begun to fade. The tension that had wrapped itself around her belly seemed to soften little by little. She held on to hope with careful hands. Each morning, she listened to the gentle sound of her baby's heartbeat on the monitor and let it calm her spirit. 3 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, her daughter arrived. The delivery room glowed with warm lights, and the nurses spoke gently as they worked. Emma held onto the sides of the bed, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pushed through the final moments of labor.
When the newborn's cry filled the room, Emma felt a wave of gratitude so deep it left her shaking. The nurse placed the tiny girl in her arms, wrapped in a soft hospital blanket. Emma gazed at her daughter's face and whispered her name, Lily. Lily's small fingers curled around Emma's thumb as if claiming her place in the world. Emma pressed her lips to the infant's forehead, letting the warmth of her tiny body settle into her heart. For the first time since the attack, she felt whole again. The door opened quietly, and Thomas stepped into the room. He moved slowly, as if afraid to disturb the moment. Emma looked up at him with tired eyes and smiled. "Would you like to hold her?" Thomas froze, overwhelmed. His eyes glistened. He nodded silently and reached out his trembling hands. Emma placed Lily gently into his arms. Thomas's breath caught. He stared at the little girl as if she were a miracle he never expected to receive. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered a greeting to his granddaughter. He laughed softly, unable to contain his emotion. Emma watched him and felt something inside her mend. Later that afternoon, Patricia, Robert, Wright, and Margaret arrived together. They carried flowers and small gifts, but what mattered most was the warmth in their voices. They gathered around the bed, smiling with genuine pride. "Look at her," said Patricia softly. "A perfect little fighter." Robert nodded. "You changed everything, Emma. You gave every victim a voice. You forced the system to listen." Wright leaned forward, smiling warmly. "She's gonna grow up strong, just like her mother." Margaret brushed a hand over the blanket. "I can't wait to tell her one day how brave you were. You saved her life before she ever took her first breath." Emma listened to them with tears in her eyes. She squeezed their hands, grateful for each of them. They had not only defended her, they had saved her and her daughter. In the days that followed, the news continued to spread across the country. Articles appeared in major publications describing Marcus Walton's crimes and the evidence that had brought him down. Reporters interviewed former employees, financial analysts, and legal experts. The story of the Gala revelation became a symbol of responsibility. The charity fund Marcus had falsely promoted was now under the management of legitimate organizations dedicated to women escaping abusive homes. Donations poured in from people moved by Emma's courage. When Emma was discharged, Thomas drove her to a small apartment he had quietly renovated. It was not grand, but it was filled with light and soft colors. Fresh paint covered the walls. A crib stood near the window, decorated with a simple mobile of tiny wooden stars. Fresh curtains fluttered gently in the spring breeze. Emma stepped inside with Lily in her arms and felt a rush of emotion. She had never expected to have a place that felt safe, but now she did. Thomas helped her settle Lily into the crib. Then he walked to a small shelf on the wall. He placed a framed photograph of Rachel Collins taken many years earlier. Beside it, he set another frame. It held the only picture Emma had from her childhood, a small photo of herself with her mother. And next to those two, he added the newest frame, holding a picture of Lily taken only hours after birth. 3 generations, side by side. Emma watched quietly as Thomas adjusted the frames until they were perfectly aligned. She pressed her hand to her heart, feeling the depth of the moment. Something inside her felt complete. She began taking short walks in the neighborhood when her strength returned. She pushed Lily's stroller beneath the soft morning sunlight. The sky always looked gentler during those early hours. The world felt calm, almost sacred. Emma inhaled the cool air, feeling her body regain its steadiness. People she passed on the sidewalk sometimes recognized her from the news, but they approached her kindly. Some offered quiet congratulations, others simply smiled. Emma felt lighter than she had in months. Thomas eventually moved into the apartment next door. He insisted it made sense. He wanted to be close. He wanted to help with Lily. Emma did not argue. Having him nearby brought comfort she never expected to feel again. He knocked each morning to check on them. He brought warm meals and small gifts for Lily. He took pictures of her first smiles and recorded the sound of her tiny breath when she slept. One evening, as Lily lay asleep in her crib, Emma sat at her small desk with a pen in hand. She opened a blank journal. She began to write a letter. It was addressed to any woman who felt trapped, afraid, or alone. Her words flowed steadily. You are not alone. You are stronger than you know, and there are people who will fight for you if you let them. Your life has meaning. Your story matters. She hoped her message would reach someone who needed it. The apartment was quiet as dawn approached. Gentle sunlight filtered through the curtains and fell across Lily's crib. Emma walked to her daughter's side and placed a hand near her tiny chest. She felt the soft, steady rhythm of her breathing. Lily's fingers twitched in her sleep. Her world was just beginning. The light grew brighter, the first morning of a new chapter. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt open.